Harley's V-twin changed motorcycling forever, but today its future is uncertain. This isn't just history, it's a fight for identity. Stay until the end, because if you don't, you'll never understand why this engine matters, and why its roar could fade into silence sooner than you think. The moment Milwaukee changed the world. It started with just 7 horsepower, but it shook the world of motorcycling forever. In the early years of the 20th century, when most machines were still little more than bicycles with small engines strapped on, Harley-Davidson's decision in 1909 to bolt together 2 cylinders in a V-shape was audacious. Their earlier single-cylinder machines had been practical, but they were modest at best. Riders wanted more than practicality. They wanted muscle. They wanted speed. And in the smoky workshops of Milwaukee, that desire found its answer. The leap from 1 cylinder to 2 was not just a technical adjustment, it was a statement of ambition. Doubling the cylinders nearly doubled the power output, turning a humble 3-horsepower single into a machine that could produce 7. Suddenly, motorcycling was no longer about keeping pace with a horse or simply escaping the tedium of walking. It was about commanding the road with something that felt alive beneath you. This timing could not have been better. America was in the throes of industrialization. Cities expanded, roads lengthened, and workers were eager for new ways to travel. The country's culture of invention demanded symbols of modernity, and Harley's V-twin became one of them. The shape of that engine, 2 cylinders angled like open arms, was more than mechanical geometry. It was a promise of speed, power, and American grit. But adding a 2nd cylinder did not just double the power, it created a sound no one had ever heard before. The sound that became a patent. Some companies trademark logos. Harley patented thunder itself. In 1915, engineers realized that the odd rhythm of their V-twin was not a flaw but a brand identity in its own right. The distinctive potato-potato exhaust note emerged from a deliberate choice. A 45-degree angle between cylinders combined with a single-pin crankshaft that forced uneven firing intervals. One cylinder fired, then the other, but not in perfect symmetry. The gaps, the stumbles, the syncopated beat, that was the sound that would echo down American highways for more than a century. Other motorcycles hummed or buzzed. Harley growled. It was not just noise, it was personality cast in metal. That rhythm spoke to riders in a way statistics never could. It felt like a heartbeat, rough and irregular, but alive. Crowds knew the sound before they saw the bike. To protect it, Harley went to the patent office, enshrining their mechanical music in law. It was not just an engineering diagram, but an audible signature that could not be mistaken for anything else. This was genius in branding before marketing had even caught up. A rider did not need to wave a flag or wear a patch. The moment they rolled on the throttle, the engine declared allegiance for them. It was rebellious mechanical poetry and uniquely American. And that sound was not just music, it carried the promise of brutal, chest-rattling torque. If you're still watching, you're clearly as hooked on Harley's story as I am. So hit that like button. It shows me you want more deep dives like this. And drop a comment below. What does Harley's sound mean to you? Torque you can feel in your chest. Forget the spec sheets. Harley's secret weapon is what you feel the moment you twist the throttle. Where sport bikes often chase astronomical horsepower at dizzying revolutions per minute, Harley's V-twin lives in another world. It delivers torque low in the rev range, right where everyday riders actually need it. That means instead of winding the engine to 10,000 or 12,000 revolutions, a Harley lunges forward from idle with a grunt you feel in your spine. Horsepower might win races on a track, but torque is what wins traffic lights, steep hills, and the simple thrill of pulling away with authority. Harley's early riders valued that punch because it turned every ride into a demonstration of mechanical muscle. It was less about speed records and more about dominance in the real world. Compared to the silky, high-revving inline-4 engines of later decades, the V-twin feels primal. It pulls with immediacy, without waiting for the tachometer to climb. This sensation, torque that feels like a hammer striking with every piston stroke, defined Harley riding culture. It was about presence, not polish, about muscle, not manners. And it created loyalty that horsepower statistics alone could never explain. Riders who wanted to feel the road under their boots chose torque over top-end speed every time. And that muscular pull would soon carry Harley far beyond city streets, even onto battlefields. Harley's V-twin is more than an engine, it's identity. If you ride one, do it right. We've gathered the best gear and accessories to honor the legacy. Check the description below. From barnyards to battlefields, what started as a farm road machine became a war machine almost overnight. By the time the United States entered the First World War, Harley had proven its reliability. The Army ordered thousands of V-twin motorcycles to serve as dispatch carriers, reconnaissance tools, and even light transport across muddy European fields. Soldiers who once rode horses now trusted Milwaukee steel. The same qualities that made the engine beloved on dusty American backroads, torque, simplicity, ruggedness, now served in the chaos of war. When the Second World War erupted, the V-twin's reputation only grew stronger. The WLA model became a mechanical symbol of American might, shipped overseas in staggering numbers. These bikes were rugged enough to be wrenched back to life in field workshops, yet powerful enough to carry messages and soldiers across rough terrain. They were not glamorous, but they were dependable, the same virtues that civilians admired back home. This wartime role transformed Harley from a niche manufacturer into an emblem of American identity. To many, the sight of a V-twin roaring through European villages meant liberation. To returning veterans, the sound of that engine meant freedom carried back home. Harley had crossed from barnyards to battlefields and returned as more than a motorcycle company. It was a cultural symbol welded into the idea of America itself. But war was not the only trial. Harley's real test would come from its own engineers. From Knucklehead to Milwaukee 8, every time Harley seemed stuck, a new engine family pulled them forward. The story of Harley's survival is not just about selling motorcycles, it is about repeatedly reinventing the heart of the machine. In 1936, Harley released the Knucklehead, the first production engine with overhead valves. Its nickname came from the oddly shaped rocker covers that resembled clenched fists, but what mattered was the leap in performance. Riders suddenly had smoother breathing, higher power, and more durability than before. The panhead followed in 1948, swapping iron heads for aluminum and dramatically improving cooling. The shovelhead arrived in the 1960s, delivering more horsepower to keep up with America's appetite for speed. But these engines were not just about numbers. Each one carried the company through a different cultural era, from the war years to the counterculture 60s. By the 1980s, Harley was nearly bankrupt. Reliability issues and foreign competition nearly crushed them. Then came the Evolution engine in 1984, a redesigned oil-tight V-twin that brought riders back in droves. Later, the twin cam in 1999 pushed displacement even higher, and in 2016, the Milwaukee 8 introduced 4 valves per cylinder with smoother power delivery. Each family was born out of necessity, not luxury. Harley's history proves that engineering breakthroughs were survival tactics as much as innovation. But not every experiment was a triumph. Some nearly destroyed the company's reputation. Failures that taught genius. Harley's worst ideas became the fuel for its greatest successes. Take the 1914 5D V-twin with its magneto mounted directly in front of the engine. On paper, it seemed practical, keeping the ignition dry from rain. In reality, it created a nightmare for mechanics. Accessing the magneto meant dismantling half the motorcycle. Riders hated it, and Harley quickly abandoned the idea after a single year. That disaster became a lesson. Never sacrifice serviceability for novelty. Another misstep was the early total loss oiling system. Riders had to manually pump oil during long trips, essentially babysitting their engines mile after mile. Forgetting to do so could mean catastrophic failure. These awkward systems gave Harley a reputation for leaks and unreliability that would haunt them for decades. And yet, those humiliations forced engineers to perfect recirculating oiling and better sealing. Each mistake became a blueprint for what not to do again. The Magneto disaster taught Harley to prioritize rider serviceability. The leaky oil systems pushed them toward the more robust evolution. These painful lessons meant that when competitors from Japan arrived in the 1970s with motorcycles that rarely broke down, Harley finally had an answer. In engineering, scars often teach more than trophies. And sometimes it was not road riders who demanded change, it was racers. When racing forced reinvention. On the track, excuses do not survive. Only engines do. Harley-Davidson learned this the hard way through decades of competition. Flat track racing, America's dirt oval tradition, forced the company to squeeze more torque and durability from the V-twin than the streets ever demanded. Racers punished engines at full throttle for hours, and weak designs simply did not survive. The legendary XR 750, born for flat track, became one of the most dominant racing engines of the 20th century. Drag racing offered another battlefield. Riders stripped Harleys down and demanded instant torque off the line. The brutal stress of quarter-mile sprints forced Harley engineers to strengthen crankcases, refine cooling, and innovate in carburation. Racing was not a hobby. It was a laboratory where failure meant public humiliation. Internationally, Ducati redefined V-twin performance with its desmodromic valve systems, while Japanese manufacturers perfected smooth, high-revving machines. Each rival pushed Harley to protect its identity. Massive torque, distinctive sound, and durability. To lose in racing was to risk losing on the showroom floor. The pressure was relentless, but it sharpened Harley's engineering instincts like a whetstone. But speed was not the only challenge. Soon, Harley had to fight an enemy even bigger than its rivals: the environment. Meeting the Green Challenge. The V-twin was born in smoke and oil, but to survive, it had to breathe clean air. By the 1970s, environmental regulations began to reshape the motorcycle industry. California introduced strict emission standards, and the federal government followed with its own Environmental Protection Agency mandates. Harley faced a stark choice: evolve or die. Carburetors gave way to electronic fuel injection, offering precise fuel delivery and reduced unburned hydrocarbons. Catalytic converters appeared in exhaust systems to cut harmful emissions. Engineers reimagined combustion chambers, valve timing, and cooling to meet legal thresholds without destroying the Harley experience. It was a balancing act, clean enough to satisfy regulators, but raw enough to satisfy loyal riders. The Milwaukee 8, introduced in 2016, became the clearest symbol of this balance. With dual spark plugs per cylinder, 4 valves per head, and smoother operation, it delivered stronger performance while cutting emissions. Riders got more torque and efficiency, and regulators got cleaner exhaust. The V-twin that once dripped oil on the garage floor had become a highly managed, computer-optimized machine fit for the 21st century. And just as Harley solved engineering problems, a new storm was brewing in the culture of America itself. The Harley soundtrack of rebellion. For some, it was just an engine. For others, it was the sound of freedom, or defiance. The uneven beat of Harley's V-twin became more than mechanical rhythm. It became the anthem of rebellion. In the 1960s and 70s, when America was fractured by war, politics, and generational divides, that sound carried meanings far beyond horsepower. To mainstream society, it could sound threatening, a growl announcing outsiders rolling into town. To the riders themselves, it was identity, raw and unapologetic. Hollywood cemented this association. The film Easy Rider in 1969 cast the Harley chopper as a rolling symbol of counterculture, freedom, and anti-establishment spirit. The deep rumble on the open road was not just noise, it was the soundtrack of an America challenging authority. Motorcycle clubs amplified that image. Leather jackets, tattoos, and roaring V-twins announced rejection of conformity. Harley did not design rebellion, but its engines became the amplifier of it. Even ordinary riders who were not outlaws absorbed the symbolism. Weekend riders felt the thrill of tapping into a cultural current larger than themselves. The torque and sound were not just about mechanics, but about meaning. Every twist of the throttle echoed defiance, independence, and the refusal to be silenced. But rebellion does not exist without identity, and Harley's identity was carried not just by riders, but by workers. Union jackets and leather vests. Behind every chrome engine was a factory floor full of workers fighting for their piece of the dream. Harley's image might have been forged on highways, but its reality was hammered out in Milwaukee factories. The men and women who assembled those V-twins believed they were crafting more than machines. They were building icons. For them, Made in America was not a slogan, but a livelihood. Harley's workforce often found itself in conflict with management. Union struggles shaped the rhythm of production just as much as pistons shaped the rumble of engines. Wages, benefits, and job security became rallying cries as global competition threatened local jobs. The identity of Harley was not only in its sound, but in the sweat of the people who built it. Workers saw themselves as guardians of authenticity. If a Harley was not American-made, was it still a Harley at all? This tension created a unique duality. On the streets, leather vests represented rebellion. In the factories, Union jackets represented solidarity. Together, they formed the cultural armor of the brand. Harley was both a worker's pride and a rider's rebellion. That paradox gave it strength and also made it vulnerable. Because as the global market shifted, Harley had to fight a war beyond its borders. And while workers fought for wages, Harley fought a very different war, against Japan. Harley versus Japan. In the 1970s, Harley faced its deadliest rival, and it came from across the Pacific. Japanese manufacturers such as Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, and Kawasaki unleashed a wave of motorcycles that combined reliability, affordability, and innovation. Riders who had grown weary of Harley's oil leaks, breakdowns, and inconsistent quality suddenly had alternatives that started every time, ran smoother, and cost less. Honda's CB750 became a sensation, offering performance that humiliated Harley's aging lineup. Yamaha and Kawasaki followed with cruisers that borrowed Harley's styling but added modern engineering. The effect was devastating. By the late 1970s, Harley's sales plummeted. The once unshakable American icon looked like it might collapse under the weight of its own tradition. To riders, this was not just about engines, it was about identity. Was Harley still relevant in a world where Japanese bikes were faster, cleaner, and cheaper? Many young riders defected, while older loyalists clung to the V-twin out of pride. The brand teetered on the edge and bankruptcy loomed as a real possibility. And just when it seemed the brand might die, a new engine saved it. Resurrection by evolution. One engine did not just power bikes, it resurrected Harley itself. In 1984, Harley introduced the Evolution engine known simply as the Evo. This V-twin was a turning point. Oil-tight, reliable, and powerful enough to compete in a world dominated by foreign manufacturers. For the first time in decades, a Harley could be trusted not only for its sound, but for its dependability. The Evo was not just engineering, it was salvation. Riders who had drifted away returned. Dealers who feared collapse saw sales climb again. The engine marked Harley's rebirth at a cultural moment when American pride surged during the Reagan era. The Evo became a symbol of resilience, proving that heritage could adapt without losing its soul. The Evo also reignited Harley's custom culture. Builders embraced its durability, chopping and shaping it into countless variations that filled streets and magazines. It became the canvas for self-expression, proof that engineering strength could fuel creativity. The Evo was not only survival, it was rebirth with style. Beyond mechanics, the Evo restored confidence. It showed that Harley could modernize while preserving the thunderous torque and unmistakable identity riders cherished. For a company once left for dead, this was resurrection. Yet success carried its own risks. Rivals were not standing still, and innovation outside America was accelerating. But even resurrection could not shield Harley forever because rivals were sharpening their own weapons. Global rivals close in. The V-twin may have been born in Milwaukee, but its enemies were gathering worldwide. By the late 20th century, Harley-Davidson was no longer just competing against domestic rivals. Italian, Japanese, and even resurrected American names were pushing into its territory with their own visions of what a V-twin could be. Ducati, with its desmodromic valve systems and sky-high rev ceilings, redefined what a V-twin meant in performance terms. Their bikes were lean, fast, and track-proven, shattering the idea that a two-cylinder configuration was only for low-end grunt. Meanwhile, Japanese manufacturers were relentless. Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, and Kawasaki built V-twins that could mimic Harley's cruiser style but undercut it with smoother operation, cheaper prices, and famously bulletproof reliability. Riders who wanted the look of Milwaukee steel without the oil stains or breakdowns found answers across the Pacific. Harley's exclusivity was no longer guaranteed. Its identity was being copied, remixed, and sometimes improved upon. Each competitor forced Harley to confront uncomfortable truths. Ducati proved that performance could be art. Japan showed that reliability could be universal, and Indian reminded everyone that heritage could be reclaimed. Harley was no longer the only storyteller of V-twins, it was now one voice in a chorus. Then came Indian's rebirth. Once Harley's greatest American rival, Indian roared back in the 21st century with engines like the Thunderstroke and Power Plus. They delivered modern power while still honoring heritage styling, directly targeting Harley's most loyal customers. Suddenly, Harley was squeezed from every side. Italy brought performance, Japan brought reliability, and Indian brought heritage reborn. But Harley's biggest battles were not fought on the track or the showroom floor, they were fought in Washington. Politics, tariffs, and trade wars. When Harley could not beat rivals with steel, it turned to politics. In 1983, President Ronald Reagan's administration imposed steep tariffs on imported Japanese motorcycles over 700 cubic centimeters. This was not just an economic decision, it was a symbolic gesture. Harley had been battered by competition, and the government stepped in to shield one of America's last great motorcycle manufacturers. The tariff gave Harley a breathing space, a chance to regroup and rebuild without being crushed by foreign imports. This moment cemented Harley's image as more than a company. It became a patriotic emblem. Buying a Harley was not just a consumer choice, it was an act of loyalty to American manufacturing. Politicians used the brand as shorthand for grit and working-class identity, while the company leaned heavily into flag-waving marketing campaigns. The V-twin became not only an engine, but a political tool, representing defiance in the face of globalization. The tariff also sparked heated debate. Some critics saw it as Harley hiding behind government walls instead of competing fairly. Others argued it was a necessary lifeline for an American icon. Either way, it proved that Harley was more than a brand, it was a political bargaining chip. But there was a catch. Tariffs could delay defeat, but they could not guarantee long-term survival. Once the protection lifted, Harley still had to compete head-to-head with faster, cheaper, and more advanced rivals. Survival required reinvention, not just political favors. And protectionism only bought time. The real shock was about to come from inside Harley itself. The electric shock. What happens when a company built on thunder goes silent? In 2019, Harley launched the Livewire, its first fully electric motorcycle. On paper, it was a marvel. Instant torque, sleek design, and acceleration that rivaled sport bikes. But the question was not whether it worked, it was whether it still felt like a Harley. Riders accustomed to the potato-potato rumble now faced near silence. The V-twin identity was so central that engineers had to program artificial vibration into the electric motor to keep the bike from feeling soulless. This was Harley wrestling with its own legacy. The Livewire was fast, clean, and futuristic, but it alienated many traditionalists who equated noise with authenticity. Younger riders, the very audience Harley needed, admired the technology but balked at the high price tag. The result was an uneasy product, praised by the press, admired by tech enthusiasts, but struggling to find its place in Harley's own fan base. For decades, Harley had sold the promise of visceral noise and vibration. The Livewire flipped that script, trading roar for whisper. For some, it was liberation, a futuristic Harley without compromise. For others, it was betrayal, a motorcycle stripped of its very heartbeat. The division ran deep. It was proof of how hard it is to evolve when your brand is built on something as primal as sound and torque. Silence could be efficient, but could it ever be Harley? And that raises the ultimate question: can the V-twin soul survive the future? You followed the roar, the rebellion, and the risks all the way here. But the most important part of this story is still coming. So make sure you subscribe right now, because what happens next could reshape Harley's future forever. And you do not want to miss it. Can Thunder survive tomorrow? 115 years later, the V-twin faces its greatest test: survival in a changing world. Environmental pressures are mounting, with emissions regulations tightening in Europe, Asia, and America. Hybrid technologies are on the horizon, and electric motorcycles are no longer science fiction. Younger generations value sustainability as much as style, and they do not always share the same emotional attachment to noise and vibration that defined earlier eras. Harley must adapt without erasing its essence. Some imagine hybrid V-twins that blend electric assistance with gasoline power, delivering torque while cutting emissions. Others argue Harley should focus entirely on electric platforms and invent a new kind of identity for the 21st century. The risk is existential. If Harley abandons the V-twin, it may lose its core audience. But if it clings too tightly, it may lose relevance with the next generation. The answer may depend on imagination as much as engineering. If Harley can translate the raw emotion of its V-twin into new forms through design, technology, and culture, it might keep Thunder alive. The future demands evolution, but evolution does not always mean surrender. This is the crossroads of tradition and innovation. Harley's sound, its torque, and its heritage have carried it across wars, economic crises, and cultural upheavals. But the road ahead demands choices more difficult than any before. Technology, politics, and consumer values are colliding at once, forcing Harley to ask whether Thunder can be reborn in silence. Because if the V-twin dies, it will not just be the end of an engine, it will be the end of an era. The story of Harley's V-twin isn't finished. It's still being written with every mile, every rider, every challenge ahead. If you want to keep riding with us through the twists and turns of history and the future, hit subscribe, share this video, and join the conversation. Don't miss what comes next.